It's your wedding night, the happiest night of your life. The church bells have rung, your family has celebrated. The woman you love, the woman you've dreamed of building a life with, is finally yours. But she's not yours, not tonight. Because before you can touch her, before you can even close the door, a messenger arrives at your home. And he tells you, with no emotion on his face, that your bride is to be delivered. Delivered, like property, to the bed of your feudal lord. And you can do nothing. You can't fight, you can't refuse, you can't even cry about it in public, because this isn't a crime, it's the law. They called it Jus Primae Noctis, the right of the first night. And if even half of what has been claimed about this tradition is true, it is one of the most depraved, most stomach-turning abuses of power in the history of civilization. But here's the thing, and this is where the story gets really twisted. There's a war about whether this was ever even real. Some say it's pure myth. Some say the evidence is undeniable. And some say the truth is far worse than either side will admit. So today, we're going to tear this apart. Every claim, every lie, every dark corner. And I promise you, by the end of this video, you will never look at the medieval world the same way again. Act 1. The claim. The term is Latin, Jus Primae Noctis. It translates to the right of the first night. In French, they had a prettier name for it, droit du seigneur, the Lord's right. But there was nothing pretty about what it described. When a peasant under a lord's domain got married, the lord had the supposed legal right to spend the first night with the bride. Before the husband, before anyone, the lord came first. And let's not dance around what that means. This wasn't the lord showing up to toast the happy couple and leave. This was sexual access to the bride on her wedding night, whether she wanted it or not. Whether the husband wept or raged or begged, it didn't matter. You handed her over, or you lost everything. Now, this story has been repeated for centuries. It shows up in old Scottish chronicles, where a supposed king named Evanus III allegedly made it law in the 9th century, granting every lord the right to deflower any bride married under their land. It shows up in Enlightenment writing, where philosophers weaponized it against the church. It shows up in folk songs and court records and legal texts from France, Catalonia, Germany, Italy, Russia. The story was everywhere, but everywhere doesn't mean true. So let's talk about what we can actually prove. Act 2. The money trail and the real horror. Across medieval Europe, there are documented cases, not legends, not folk tales, documents, where peasants were required to pay a fee to their lord on the night of their marriage. Different places called it different things. In France, it was the coulagium. In Scotland, the merchant. In Catalonia, the remensa. But the structure was always the same. You want to marry? You pay. And this is where the comfortable version of the story lives. The version that says, relax, it was just a tax. Lords charged peasants for everything, using the mill, crossing the bridge, getting married. It was financial exploitation, not sexual. The people who say Jus Primae Noctis was a myth are technically correct in one narrow, almost meaningless sense. There was no single, universal, codified law, stamped by a king, blessed by a pope, filed in some grand legal archive, that said in black and white, lords may sleep with brides on their wedding night. No king signed it. No parliament passed it. No legal code enshrined it. And that fact, that technicality, has been enough for some people to close the book and say, see? Myth. Debunked. Move on. But here's what they're not telling you. Think about what it actually meant to be a serf in medieval Europe. You did not own your land. Your lord did. You did not own the food you grew. Your lord took his share first. You couldn't leave. You couldn't marry without permission. You couldn't send your children to the next village. Your body, your labor, your life. It all belonged to the man who held the deed to the dirt you stood on. Now I want you to sit with that for a moment. In that world, a world where a lord could beat you, imprison you, starve your family, throw you off your land on a whim, do you really think he needed a piece of paper to take a woman to his bed? Really? The debate about whether the law formally existed is almost a distraction. Because in a system where lords had total physical, economic, and legal power over peasant families, sexual exploitation wasn't some rare exception that required a special statute. It was baked into the architecture of the system. And the proof? The proof isn't in some dusty chronicle. The proof is in what the church did. Court records from medieval England are full of lords accused of assaulting the wives and daughters of their tenants. Church documents from the 12th and 13th centuries contain repeated warnings to feudal lords about the sin of taking liberties with peasant women. Now think about that. The church, the most powerful institution in medieval Europe, felt the need to tell lords, over and over again, stop doing this. In 1102, the Council of London explicitly condemned the treatment of women as sexual property. In 1214, the French crown issued edicts to curb seigneurial abuses against women. You don't write laws to ban things that aren't happening. You don't issue warnings about sins nobody is committing. The formal law may not have existed, but the thing it described? The raw, predatory conversion of power into sexual dominance? That was happening. Everywhere, all the time. A law would have been redundant. Act 3. The oldest story ever told. And here's the part that should disturb you even more. This wasn't a medieval invention. This wasn't even a European invention. The Epic of Gilgamesh, one of the oldest written stories in human history, carved into clay tablets 4,000 years ago, describes a king who slept with every bride in his city before her husband could. The people of Uruk hated him for it. They prayed to the gods to send someone strong enough to stop him. 4,000 years ago. And they were already writing about this. Because the principle behind the first night isn't about feudalism. It isn't about Europe. It isn't about the Middle Ages. It's about something much older and much uglier. It's the idea that power entitles you to any woman. And that idea didn't die with feudalism. It just changed its clothes. The plantation owners of the American South, who had the same absolute authority over enslaved people that any medieval lord had over his serfs, did the exact same thing. Different century, different continent, same horror. The factory bosses of the Industrial Revolution, who controlled whether a woman's family ate or starved. The military commanders in every war zone on Earth, where the conquered are treated as spoils. The powerful men behind closed doors in every industry, in every era, who looked at someone with less power and thought the same ancient thought. Who's going to stop me? No one ever needed a law for this. Power was the law. Epilogue. So the next time someone tells you Jus Primae Noctis was just a myth, ask them this. A myth to whom? To the people debating Latin terminology in comfortable rooms? Sure, maybe. But to the woman in 13th century France whose lord sent for her before she could go home to her husband? To the serf bride in Russia who had no legal standing, no protection, no voice, and no choice? To every woman across every century who stood powerless before a man who owned the ground she walked on? It wasn't a myth, it was Tuesday. If this video made you think, share it with someone. And if you haven't already, subscribe to Dust and Dynasty, because we don't just tell history here, we confront it. I'll see you in the next one.